Starting with insulin and oral anti-diabetic agents, so diabetes mellitus is a clinical syndrome characterized by hyperglycemia due to absolute or relative deficiency of insulin. So type 1 diabetes mellitus, the etiology is immunological or idiopathic. It is an autoimmune process that destroys more than 90% of the beta cells of the pancreas, and the peak incidence is around 50 years, so juvenile onset. In type 1 diabetes mellitus, there is insulin deficiency. Okay, so insulin is essential. Type 2 diabetes mellitus, genetic influence is much more. So overeating, obesity, underactivity and aging are the main risk factors. So it is associated with increased hepatic production of glucose and resistance of target tissues to the actions of insulin. So type 1 is insulin dependent, type 2 is insulin resistant. Okay, so hormones of pancreas. So basically alpha cells secrete glucagon, beta cells secrete insulin as well as amylin, delta cells secrete somatostatin, and F cells or pancreatic polypeptide cells secrete pancreatic polypeptide. So insulin was discovered by Banting and Best. It is synthesized by the beta cells of the pancreas from a single chain polypeptide precursor called pre-proinsulin, which is cleaved to form proinsulin. And then the C peptide is removed, which is a connecting peptide between A chain and the B chain. So when C peptide is removed, mature insulin consists of A peptide, which is linked by disulfide bridges to the B chain. Okay, C peptide can produce immunological reactions. So regulation of insulin secretion, it is regulated by chemical, neural and hormonal mechanisms. So chemical, basically glucose, fats and amino acids in the blood, they stimulate the beta cells to release insulin. Okay, that is the chemical mechanism. So also release of gut peptides like GLP-1 and GIP after eating these things. Okay, that also promotes insulin secretion. Okay, so oral nutrients are more effective in stimulating incretin secretion as compared to intravenous infusion. Okay, so basically ingestion of glucose, fatty acids and amino acids, they also they stimulate the beta cells at the same time. See, okay, they stimulate the beta cells. Okay, at the same time they release GI hormones called incretins, which are gut peptides like GLP-1 and GIP, which promote insulin secretion. Okay, oral is better than intravenous. Next, neural. So both parasympathetic and sympathetic fibers supply the islet cells. So basically parasympathetic as well as beta 2 adrenergic stimulation, it increases insulin, causes hypoglycemia, whereas alpha 2 stimulation decreases insulin, causes hyperglycemia. Next, hormonal. So insulin is a hypoglycemic hormone, and then hyperglycemic hormones you have ACG, so adrenaline, cortisol and glucagon. So catecholamines, corticosteroids, glucagon. Okay, you have these things, growth hormone and thyroxine. Normal blood glucose, you have that, all these values, right? Okay, next, moving on to the actions of insulin. So basically what it does is insulin tells cells to take in take in glucose. Okay, so it decreases the blood glucose levels, and also it decreases blood glucose levels by inhibiting glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. Okay, it does not do anything with absorption of glucose. What it does is the blood sugar which is there, it converts them into proteins. So protein synthesis, so fats, so lipogenesis, and also peripheral utilization of glucose is increased. So that is what insulin does. Insulin also promotes peripheral utilization of glucose and also potassium uptake into the cells. So that is why there is, see, basically the potassium is locked, right, because of K plus sensitive ATP sensitive K plus channels, they are closed. So potassium is intracellular, so there is hypokalemia on insulin use. Mechanism of action of insulin. So basically insulin binds to specific tyrosine kinase receptors. They have an extracellular alpha subunit and a transmembrane beta subunit. So alpha subunits, they bind the insulin, which causes phosphorylation of the beta, autophosphorylation of the alpha subunits and then the beta subunits. Okay, and that again leads to complex series of phosphorylation, dephosphorylation reactions, which promotes entry of glucose into the cell and mediates the actions. So pharmacokinetics. Insulin is a peptide. Okay, so if you take it orally in the stomach, you have proteolytic enzymes that destroy its activity. So it is not given orally. So you can give it by subcutaneous route, but in emergencies you can use IV route. After IV injection, soluble insulin is rapidly metabolized by the liver and kidney with a half-life of 6 minutes. So insulin preparations, you have conventional animal derived insulin. So you have bovine insulin, 3 amino acids are different from normal human insulin and it is antigenic to man. Porcine insulin, only 1 amino acid is different. So immunogenicity is less than bovine. Next, so these are conventional. Then you have monocomponent C and MC. So monocomponent ones are actually purified insulins. They have less than 10 ppm of contaminants. So basically you take the conventional porcine insulin, you purify it with purification techniques to get monocomponent pork insulin. Okay, the antigenicity is less. Next, you have human insulins which are produced by recombinant DNA technology from E. coli or yeast. They have the same amino acid sequence as endogenous insulin. They are least immunogenic and they do not cause insulin resistance in lipodystrophy because it is a rare case with human insulin itself. Okay, so examples are human regular insulin and NPH insulin. Okay, next you have insulin analogs. Okay, the action is similar to human insulin but the pharmacokinetics are altered. That's it. Next, you have insulin preparations based on onset and duration of action. Okay, here you have the derivation from which animal it is derived from, and here you have the onset and duration of action. So first you have rapidly acting insulin analogs. Basically, they do not form hexamers. They immediately break down into the monomers on SC administration, subcutaneous administration, and then they are rapidly absorbed because they immediately break down into monomers and they do not form hexamers. Okay, so they have a rapid onset of action within 5 to 15 minutes, rapid. Peak effect is in 1 hour. Okay, so remember this. So rapid, okay, 5 to 15 minutes times 4 is the duration of action. Peak effect is 1 hour. Okay, 4 hours is the duration of action. Next, basically they lower the risk of late postprandial hypoglycemia because they act very rapidly. Okay. Next, binding to insulin receptor is similar as of human regular insulin. Here you can see a basic graph. Okay. So examples of rapidly acting insulin analogs. See, apart from regular insulin. So aspart. Okay, apart you're kissing pro, so kiss pro, so lispro, and glue kiss. If you kiss, your mouths appear glued together, right? So glulicin. Okay, so glulicin. Next, moving on to insulin preparations, other insulin preparations, you have short acting insulin, which is crystalline zinc insulin. It forms hexamer, so it is slowly absorbed. Okay, the duration of onset is 30 minutes, administered 30 minutes before meals. Okay, half an hour before meals because that is the onset, and duration is 6 hours. So it is available as 40 units, 100 units and 500 units. SCIV routes are there. Next, you have intermediate acting insulin, which is NPH insulin, a neutral protamine Hagedorn insulin or isophane insulin. It is intermediate acting. It is complex with protamine and zinc and dissociates slowly because and it is cloudy because there are protamine and zinc. Okay, it is given SC once or twice daily. Okay, here you can see basically rapid acting insulins. You have Lispro, Aspart and Glulicin. So onset is 0.25 hours, the same. Peak effect is in 1 hour and duration is 4 hours. Okay, this is clear. Next, short acting insulin, basically it is crystalline. Okay, so remember 1 into 2 equals 4 into 2 is 8. So 2 hours is the 1 hour is the onset, 2 hours is the peak effect, and 8 hours is the duration of action. 1 into 2 into this. Okay, so that you can remember. Next, intermediate acting, you have isophane. So you can remember it as 2 10 10. So 2 10 10. Onset, peak effect and duration of action. So O, P, D. Next, long acting insulins, you have glargine. It does not produce a peak. Okay, that you need to remember. So it is it does not cause a peak. So 4 hours and 24 hours long acting, right? So duration is 24 hours. Next, long acting, you have glargine, large, okay, long acting, and detamere. So it precipitates, so that is why it is slowly absorbed on SC administration. And there is peakless plasma concentration, so 24 hours is the duration of action, and it lowers the risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia than NPH insulin. It is administered once daily, and it cannot be mixed with other human insulins because of acidic pH. So you cannot mix long-acting insulins with anything else. Fasting blood glucose levels are better controlled than NPH insulin because 24 hours duration of action is there, and it is avoided in pregnant diabetics. Okay. So insulin detamere, it binds to the albumin in the blood, so that is why there is prolonged duration of action. Next, insulin therapy. So in type 1 diabetes mellitus and uncontrolled type 2 diabetes mellitus, it is useful. The main goal is to maintain fasting blood glucose concentration between 90 and 120 and postprandial below 150. So concentration of insulin, it is available as 40, 100 and 500 units per ml. SC route, all of them can be administered, but in emergencies, IV route you can use, especially in diabetic ketoacidosis for rapid effect. Next, insulin regimens. So various regimens are there. So for example, you have a split mixed regimen. So you split in the same syringe, you can load 70 ratio NPH and 30 parts regular insulin. You can give it before breakfast and before dinner. There's also another intensive regimen wherein you administer long acting insulin before breakfast or at bedtime and inject short acting insulin before each meal. Okay, extremes of the day give long acting, and before each meal you give short acting. Okay, intermediate and long-acting insulins maintain basal levels of insulin, and preprandial insulin provides postprandial needs of insulin. But in the intensive regimen, you do not mix the long-acting; you just give it at separate times. Then mixed insulin preparations. So you have this 70:30 ratio of NPHs to regular in the same syringe. So pre-mixed with insulin, lispro, are unstable. So NPH, you don't mix it immediately. You complex it with protamine. So in insulin rispro to form NPL. Okay, NPH, NPL, or NPA, which are intermediate acting like NPH. Okay, so you can use 75% NPL to 25% lispro, or 50% NPL to 50% lispro. Long acting should not be mixed. So with regular or rapid, you give them separately. So insulin administration, you have insulin syringes and needles. Pen devices are convenient because a preset amount is there. Insulin pumps are available for continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion. Okay, so an advantage is that it is programmed to deliver insulin to maintain the basal levels and also a bolus dose prior to the meals, but it is expensive and there could be mechanical problems. So indications are type 1 diabetes mellitus, diabetic ketoacidosis, uncontrolled diabetes type 2, and diabetes during pregnancy, stress of surgery, and as an adjunct. So site of administration, usually subcutaneously in the abdomen, not at the umbilicus, and then buttock, anterior thigh, and lateral arm. Next, complications of insulin therapy. First is obviously hypoglycemia. So it is the most common and dangerous complication. So basically, if you delay taking the food after insulin, or if you do too much physical activity, there is a hypoglycemia, and that can be exacerbated by insulin. So basically, it can cause permanent brain damage. So what are the symptoms? So first you have compensatory sympathetic stimulation. So you have sweating, tremors, and palpitations. Then it progresses to confusion and abnormal behavior and loss of fine motor skill. Okay, then further lowering can cause convulsions and loss of consciousness. Treatment, so you can treat all the manifestations with administration of glucose. So 50 ml of 50% dextrose is injected IV, but if the patient is conscious, you can give oral glucose. You can at the same time you can give adrenaline 0.2 mg SC or glucagon 1 mg IV for severe hypoglycemia. See, insulin, the antagonist is glucagon, so give 1 mg IV, or adrenaline also, it is a pro hyperglycemic hormone, so you can give second, so 0.2 mg SC. So glucagon IV or adrenaline SC. Next, hypoglycemia, then you have allergic reactions which are rare, but there may be local skin reactions such as swelling or redness at the site of infection due to minor contaminants. Then there could be lipodystrophy. You can avoid that by alternating the site of injection each time. Okay, and using purified insulin preparations. So insulin resistance is a state in which there is decreased response of peripheral tissues to insulin. So acute insulin resistance develops during stressful conditions like trauma, infection, surgery, and psychological stress. Next, diabetic ketoacidosis is a complication of type 1 diabetes mellitus, rare in type 2. The precipitating factors are infection, stresses, and trauma. The clinical factors, there is polyuria, polydipsia, along with that nausea and anorexia, then abdominal pain, tachycardia, and hyperventilation. Because there is acidosis, there is hyperventilation, along with that there is tachycardia, respiratory and CVS go hand in hand, and at the same time there is abdominal pain. Next, so diabetic ketoacidosis is a medical emergency. So how do you treat that? So first, obviously, insulin replacement. So IV bolus, you give it because it's an emergency in a dose of 0.2 to 0.3 units per kg, followed by 0.1 unit per kg per hour IV infusion. Okay, then blood glucose levels must decrease by 10% in the first hour. Next, fluid replacement. So you can give 1 liter per hour of NS. After the blood glucose levels fall to 250, you can give 5% glucose and 15% normal saline, so half normal saline. So 5% glucose and 0.5 normal saline. Next, you can give potassium because following insulin therapy, there is hypokalemia. So potassium chloride 10 to 20 milliequivalents per hour is infused after 4 hours. Then sodium bicarbonate is given to correct the acidosis if required, and phosphate also if there is severe hypophosphatemia. Next, there can also be hyperosmolar non-ketotic diabetic coma, which is characterized by severe hyperglycemia, hyperosmolarity in the name itself, and dehydration. So the principle is same as in the treatment of diabetic ketoacidosis, but the patient needs more and faster fluid replacement. So what are the drug interactions? So you have beta blockers with insulin and salicylates with insulin. So basically salicylates, they increase the insulin secretion. Moving on to oral anti-diabetic drugs. So the classification, I remember it this way. So first we have sulfonylurea. So that is an obvious fact. So the first generation and second generation. So first you have a tolbuta, so tolbutamide. Next, you have tall butta vesukoni glowing Benz class. So glowing Benz class, so glibenclamide. Okay, so glibenclamide, and then claps. Okay, if you're going in a glowing Benz class car, so there people will clap. Okay, claps. So peace, so pacide, glipizide, and gliclazide. Okay. Next, you have biguanide. So that is number 2, right? So 2 is bi. So biguanide. So 2 people meet for a minute. So it is metformin. Next, 2 people meet for a minute. Then they see Mowgli. So Mowgli is tiny at night. So 3, meglitinide. Mowgli tiny at night. So meglitinide. So meglitinide analog. So Mowgli, repaglonide. He has repaglonide. So repaglinide. Okay. So why does he want to know whether tomorrow is glonide, repaglonide anedi? Because he wants to listen to Alanati song. Okay. So 4 is D, the 4th letter of the alphabet. So D, Alanati. So D phenyl alanine derivative, and that is glinide. Same. The glinide is same. So glonide, right? So nateglinide. Next, 5 thigh, they rhyme. So 5 thia. Okay, remember Grey's Anatomy. After Mowgli, you saw Grey's Anatomy, right? So Zola. So Zola dines and she's done with dining. So Thia, Zoli, Din, Dion. Okay, Dindon. So it is pioglitazone because Zola likes glitter, so she makes it a glitter zone. So she uses Pio brand glitters. So pioglitazone, pie, and she plays with glitters after eating pie. So pioglitazone. Next, Aru alpha. So 6 is Aru. 6 alpha glucosidase inhibitors. So you have Aru Akaru. So 6 acarbose alpha glucosidase inhibitor. So 7 is Dappu. Okay. So DPP 4 inhibitors. So you have Sita and saxagliptin. Okay. Remember, 7 is gliptin. Dipeptidyl peptidase. Okay. So gliptin, sitagliptin, saxagliptin. And 8th it is SGLT2. Okay, remember 8. If you join S, you get 8, right? So SGLT2 inhibitors. So GLT, right? So write GL, reverse the F, topsy-turvy, you get F, again L. So gliflo, again S sin. So gliflozin. So dapagliflozin and canagliflozin. So that is a classification. Next, you have other antidiabetic agents which are parenteral. So you have GLP-1 analogs, so glutides, right? So albiglutide and dulaglutide. And then others you have pramlintide. Okay, so remember biguanides and thiazolidinediones are insulin sensitizers, whereas sulfonylureas, meglitinides, DPP4 inhibitors, and GLP-1 analogs are insulin secretagogues. Moving on to the oral and other antidiabetic drugs, so dosage and duration of action. So tolbutamide. So tol 12 hours duration. Okay, tol 2 grams, 2 divided doses. Okay, next chlorpropamide. Okay, so basically C is 3rd alphabet, right? And also while writing C, almost close it. So 0.3 grams, so that is 0.1 to 0.5 grams single dose, and 3 days duration, so 72 hours. So basically, tolbutamide, it is short acting, it has a low potency, and it is least likely to cause hypoglycemia. And chlorpropamide, it causes cholestasis, and it has a disulfiram-like action. It increases the release of ADH. So that is why chlorpropamide can be used in neurogenic diabetes insipidus, because it causes ADH release. Next, you have all these glibenclamide drugs. Okay, so you have all these 2nd generation sulfonylureas. So all of them, they act for 1 day, so 12 to 24 hours. Okay, and glibenclamide, so Benzcar, so it is 1, and B is the 2nd letter in the alphabet, 2, so 1.25 to 20 mg. Okay, 20 mg. Next, biguanide, metformin. So metformin for 500 mg TID. Okay, given with food. Okay, oral. So formin 500 mg TID. Next, for, okay, so before it is 3, so TID, and after it is 5, so 500 mg. Next, metformin is used in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus, either alone or in combination with sulfonylurea or insulin or other diabetics. It is contraindicated in patients with hepatic insufficiency and alcoholism. Next, you have meglinetide analogs. So it is 3, right? So 3 hours. Next, 3 hours is the duration. Next, so after 3, the next is 4. So 1/4 to 4 mg oral in 2 divided doses. Next, Netaglinide. So Na2 for 60 minutes for 1 hour. Okay. So 60 minutes is mg. So 60 to 120 mg orally. TDS. Okay. NTR is like TDP supporter. So TDS. And also the duration of action is 2 hours. Okay. 60 minutes and then 2 hours. Not 2 for 2 hours duration. Next, thiazolidone. So again 5. It is up to 24 hours. Okay. Next, alpha glucosidase inhibitors. It is the sixth thing, right? So acarbose, so 50 mg orally BD gradually 4. So 6. Before that is 5, so 50 mg orally BD. Then before that is 4, so 4 hours duration. The other ones you don't need to remember mostly. Next, moving on to the mechanisms of actions. So sulfonylureas are divided into 2 generations. All these drugs have the same mechanism of action but differ in potency and duration of action. Okay, the second generation drugs are more potent than the first generation drugs. So basically what they do is sulfonylureas, they bind to specific receptors on the beta cells of the islets of pancreas. Then they block the ATP sensitive potassium channels. Then because they block, sulfonylureas, they stimulate insulin secretion. So what insulin does is it increases glucose uptake into the cells. So glucose enters the cells and it is broken down to give ATP. ATP sensitive potassium channels are blocked because of ATP generation. So potassium is blocked inside the cell. So positivity in the cell increases and there is depolarization, which results in opening of calcium channels, leads to calcium influx, which causes degranulation and increased release of stored insulin from the beta cells. So that is how sulfonylureas cause insulin release. For successful therapy with sulfonylureas, at least 30% functioning beta cells are necessary. So that is why they're ineffective in type 1 diabetes, because there is greater than 90% loss of beta cells. So sulfonylureas also, they increase the sensitivity of peripheral tissues to insulin by increasing the number of insulin receptors. So sulfonylureas increase the secretion, the secretagogues, and also increase the sites, so receptors, okay, insulin receptors. They reduce the release of glucagon. So pharmacokinetics, they are well absorbed after oral administration. They are highly bound to plasma proteins and they have low volume of distribution. That is why if you give if you give salicylates, which are also highly plasma bound, they displace the sulfonylureas from the plasma proteins and then the concentration in blood increases. Next, adverse effects. Obviously, hypoglycemia is common. Okay, next, glibenclamide is best avoided in early patients. Don't give Benzcar to elderly patients, sorry. Next, GI disturbances like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Then remember this mnemonic most, okay? So metformin is used by obese patients because it causes thinning or weight loss. And then ST. So sulfonylureas are used in thin patients because it causes weight gain. Next, so NVD, hypoglycemia, weight allergy, and also teratogenicity. Sulfonylureas are not safe during pregnancy. And also chlorpropamide has disulfiram-like action, so it produces intolerance to alcohol and it also causes cholestasis. Next, drug interactions, the salicylates, we already talked about this. Next, propranolol and sulfonylureas. So propranolol, it basically decreases all the sympathetic effects, right? So it masks the symptoms of sulfonylurea induced hypoglycemia. And hypoglycemia, initially you have the compensatory mechanisms like intense sweating, all the sympathetic responses. So propranolol masks the symptoms and it delays recovery from hypoglycemia caused by sulfonylureas. And then it also inhibits glycogenolysis, propranolol. So then we have rifampin and sulfonylurea. So rifampin reduces the effects. Warfarin is in a war with glucose. It reduces glucose and increases the effects of sulfonylureas. Next, biguanide. So metformin is the only biguanide that is used clinically. So it activates the enzyme AMP-dependent protein kinase. So AMPK. It results in it results in decreased gluconeogenesis and absorption. Glycogenolysis is not affected. Okay, so decreased gluconeogenesis and absorption. And also it increases the peripheral utilization of glucose. So that is what metformin does. Next, they do not affect the insulin release. They only improve tissue sensitivity to insulin. That is one important point. So it is taken orally, it is well absorbed through GIT, and it is excreted mostly unchanged in the urine. So adverse effects, they include metallic taste and again most. So obese patients use it because it causes weight loss. Again NVD, skin rashes, and also vitamin B12 deficiency due to malabsorption. It usually does not cause hypoglycemia even in large doses. Next, metformin is used in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus either alone or in combination with other anti-diabetic agents, and hyperglycemia is rare. Next, meglitinide analogs, you have repaglinide and netaglinide, which is a D-phenylalanine derivative. So basically, the structure is not same as sulfonylureas, but the function is same. So they also act by blocking the ATP-sensitive potassium channels. So potassium increases, calcium influx happens because of depolarization due to excessive positivity by trapped K+ ions, and then the insulin is secreted. The structure is not same, but the function is same. Okay, again, they are well absorbed from GIT, metabolized in the liver, avoided in patients with hepatic failure. Okay, rapid onset but slow duration of action. Okay, RAPA is rapid. Okay, next, they are less potent than sulfonylureas. They are used only in type 2 diabetes mellitus to control postprandial hyperglycemia. So remember one thing regarding the side effects. The classification first. The first generation drugs, they cause weight gain. Second, you have metformin, which causes weight loss, and then you have the next two, which is meglitinide analogs and D-phenylalanine derivatives, which again cause weight gain. Okay, and in the last, the seventh thing, the dipeptidyl peptidase 4, DAPU, does not affect weight. Okay, next, so DPP4, so sitagliptin, alogliptin, and linagliptin, they inhibit DPP4. And whereas saxagliptin, it covalently binds with the enzyme. So sex is like two people binding covalently, right? So it binds covalently with the enzyme. So inhibition of DPP4 enzyme prevents the inactivation of GLP-1. So plasma GLP-1 increases, which increases insulin secretion. Glucagon is suppressed, and also there is improvement in control of fasting hyperglycemia and postprandial hyperglycemia. They are administered orally as adjuvants in type 2 diabetes mellitus, and allergic reactions can occur with sitagliptin. Okay. Next, we have a risk of hypoglycemia is low. Then we have thiazolidine diones. So we have that is the fifth part. So fifth is penta, right? So P for peripheral tissue sensitivity is increased by using thiazolidine diones, and 5 P for penta, so P for PPAR gamma. So they are selective agonists of PPAR gamma, which is peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma. So it binds to nuclear PPAR gamma. So genes involved regulating carbohydrate and lipid metabolism are activated, and they sensitize the peripheral tissues to insulin, and they reduce blood glucose by increasing the glucose transport into muscle and adipose tissue. So the other actions, pioglitazone reduces serum triglyceride and increases HDL levels. So Zola, basically, Zola is a high-fi woman, so she eats good cholesterol, so HDL, so it also increases weight gain. It causes weight gain. Next, pioglitazone is almost completely absorbed from GI tract, highly bound to plasma proteins and metabolized in the liver. That is why HDL is increased. Next, the adverse effects, so nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, again weight gain and edema. So because weight gain, again HDL is increased. And also Zola's sister in Grey's Anatomy serial, she has heart failure, she's adopted. So heart failure in patients with low cardiac reserve and rarely hepatotoxicity. Next, pioglitazone is used alone or in combination with sulfonylureas or metformin in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus. Next, alpha glucosidase inhibitors, there's a 6th category. So acarbose, they're used at 6 p.m. Okay, remember like this because they're given immediately before food, just before food. If you want to take food after 6 p.m., you should give it at 6 p.m. So 6. Okay, just remember the number. Next, so acarbose basically reduces the intestinal absorption of carbohydrates by inhibiting the enzyme alpha glucosidase in the brush border of the small intestine and reduces postprandial hyperglycemia. They're mainly used in obese patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus because it acts on a mucosal enzyme, the brush border enzyme, which is alpha glucosidase. Side effects are also GIT mediated mostly, that is flatulence, fullness, and diarrhea. Next, GLP-1 analogs. So you have liraglutide, albiglutide, and dulaglutide. So GLP-1 is an incretin. It is released from the gut after meals. So it stimulates glucose-dependent insulin secretion. It suppresses glucagon release and slows gastric emptying. So it is degraded by DPP4. That is why you use DPP inhibitors. And the plasma half-life is 1 to 2 minutes. So it cannot be used therapeutically. So that is why GLP-1 analogs are used. They are injected 1 hour subcutaneously before breakfast and dinner in type 2 diabetes mellitus patients. They're used as adjuncts, so they serve better glycemic control, they reduce HbA1c levels and also body weight. They help prevent progression of beta cell failure in type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay, so albiglutide and dulaglutide are long-acting with a duration of 1 week. So dulaglutide, long-acting duration. So the main side effect is nausea, and they usually do not cause hypoglycemia. Next, pramlintide. Basically, it is a synthetic analog of amylin. It decreases glucagon secretion, it decreases gastric emptying, it decreases appetite, and it also decreases the weight. As an adjuvant, it is administered subcutaneously in patients of type 1 and type 2 DM just before meals. Next, sodium SGLT2 inhibitors. So basically, dapagliflozin. Okay, 8. Okay, so 8. So SGLT2 inhibitors. So L reverse it again, so you get F, L again. Then, so GLF flows in. So dapagliflozin, canagliflozin, what they do is they inhibit SGLT2 in the renal proximal tubule and inhibit glucose reabsorption. This results in glycosuria and decrease in blood glucose levels. So they're used as an adjunct medication for better glycemic control, and the adverse effects, because they're involving the urinary tract, they include urinary tract infection.